Okay, time for some more illogic. Last time we squared off against Sazbo and his Boulder Bouldors. Please go check out that video first if you've not done so already, as we went over the team builder and battle in which, spoiler alert, the Bouffalant got back on the winning track, 4-0, carried by Tornadus-Therian and avoiding a close call against Halucha. That brings us to a 2-1 record with a +6 differential, but this time we're going against Samantha and their 3-0 Wooper Troopers. Timestamps are in the description. I haven't had the chance to chat with the Troopers coach, but I've liked a lot of their team building and in-game decision making. It led them to an undefeated run in their debut appearance last time in the Beginners League, and a 3-0 start here in the main league. Of course, the coach is not the only newcomer we need to talk about. I'm sure you can tell from the shoddy shop job last time that we had some transactions to make ourselves, and that will involve every one of my low-tier picks, Slurpuff, Mantine, Jolteon, and Pinsir. Unfortunately, Slurpuff was the big reason I wanted to make these changes, as I really wasn't seeing the opportunity for it to come in and do, frankly, anything. I loved the idea of the Indeedee Slurpuff core, but that Bronzong pick has worked out tremendously instead and was just the correct decision. If in the first 3 weeks against 3 good coaches I couldn't find anything close to resembling a set that I'd be comfortable with bringing, it just isn't going to work. Jolteon and Mantine did come to matches, which made me rethink things a little bit, but I wanted a little more variety and help, particularly with speed tiers and typing. I knew which match I wanted to bring my 20-point Pinsir to, but that 85 base speed was still frankly being wasted on a 20-point Mon, and I wanted something I was more confident in. Before I talk about those transactions, the one that didn't. I was getting set to acquire Rotom Fan, the last Rotom form I hadn't used in a draft league, but it got picked while I was contemplating the complementary moves, and we will actually face that later in the season. That forced my hand to a different electric type to replace Jolteon, but honestly I'm pretty happy that things worked out as they did anyways, as I'm pretty satisfied with the results. I probably don't need to reveal them to you one at a time since you see them on screen, but I'll order them kinda in order of my thought process. As stated before, I was uncomfortable with Slurpuff being an independent sweeper setup support mod that really didn't gel with the team in any of those manners. However, I still wanted a reliable fairy type, and I knew I would be missing those sticky webs as an option. Enter Rybombi at tier 100 as well, whose 124 speed forces just a little bit more speed creeping. Imagine if some of that HP on Crobat week 2 had been in speed just for this. The important thing for me is the speed combined with the various options this provides to me. Support-wise, you've got Sticky Web, of course, but this also retains an aromatherapy user, plus the amazing option of Stun Spore, which I really love as another status option for some of the more obvious switch-ins into Rybombi, particularly Steel and Fire types that resist both stabs and are immune to a different status. U-turn is great too. You know I loved momentum, and it helps to go into one of the bigger hitters as well elsewhere on the team. Of course, Rybombi is no slouch itself, as even at base 95 special attack, Moonblast is actually kind of tough to resist, and could force out a not insignificant amount of prep to resist to take care of that. That, of course, is not just talking about a raw Moonblast, which I actually really like added to this team, but also boosted, because we also have the answer in Quiver Dance. That is probably the best setup move in the game. Frail physical defense, yes, but the special defense becomes so tough to deal with after just 1 or 2 dances. This could be a breaker paired with Moonblast, Bug Buzz, Psychic, and Energy Ball to, again, hit everything but steel types very hard. We've also got Switcheroo for those easy switch-ins, Light Screen and Reflect for a very fast base speed, plus another Defogger that works pretty well with boots. Whether it's more or less than Slurpuff, whether it's better or worse of these things at Slurpuff, 2 things remain true. I appreciate another high-speed tier Mon, especially when to replace Jolteon, and I desperately needed a new look from Slurpuff. It just wasn't working. I love the options available from Rybombi, and I know we can find a spot for it, even in the postseason. Next, even though Mantine was able to come week 3, I wasn't convinced it was going to be the best option for me as a water, resist, and tank. I really liked the defogging capabilities, yes, but it couldn't come every week and do that for me. It was already a relatively niche option for me. It didn't resist ice the way I wanted this slot too. There's another benefit of missing out on Rotom Fan, not adding another ice weakness. Additionally, Jolteon had kinda overstayed its welcome, although I'm probably to blame for misplaying it week 2. The move pool isn't great. It forced me to play weird mind games to make it work the way I want to. Of course, I love having a good electric type, and I love the water immunity from Mantine. Lantern is my solution to both, keeping most of the elements I loved about these two and compressing them into one 60-point Mon. An ice resist, a sturdier flying resist, and immunity to either water or electric depending on the matchup. Lantern also provides a bevy of support options, including Volt Switch and Heal Bell to keep the pain coming. The offensive stats aren't impressive, 76 special attack, but Scald can burn, Discharge can para, and Ice Beam is such a great coverage move in the right situation, I don't think it matters. Add in Volt Switch, Heal Bell, T-Wave and Toxic, and maybe even a cheeky Whirlpool Soak combo, and that already in and of itself comprises a solid Pokemon that wields lefties or boots extremely well. Lots of bulks means it will be difficult to KO with neutral moves. The only weaknesses are Grass and Ground, both of which are resisted by or immune by Torn and Hydreigon at the top of my list, so some nice synergy there. It's a second Grass weakness alongside Swampert, but I'm more than fine with that, getting the other solid resists in exchange. Next we're going to talk about the other 60 point I got, the direct upgrade to Pinsir in Sock. A 20 point upgrade at first glance, it may be tough to see what the real differences are. different weaknesses and resistances, but neither was exactly a defensive powerhouse, right? However, we've got incredibly different niches and covered options available on stock that actually makes me really excited for this new 85 speed mon. Another knockoff user, yes. Another close combat user, yes. But stronger on the ladder, thanks to stab. It's a type I love having. I love having stab, close combat. Let's add in the elemental punches, plus earthquake. We've got all the coverage you need. A nice tool that fighting types tend to possess. Backing up the coverage is a whole different matter, of course. How do I get this in to put in work? Aside from terrorizing anything slower with Okos and 2-hit KOs, how do you feel about a boot set with sturdy, guaranteed to live any one hit? Yes, please. Let's add in mold breaker as another option, the ability to hit through things like levitate or multi-scale. We'll take that too. Even with these simple options, I really am loving the options provided by Sock and the raw power, something that come more often than Pincer while doing mostly the same things, just a little bit better. We've got Brick Break, Bulk Up, Fire Ice Thunder Punch, which is actually sometimes rare to see, Rock Slide and Stone Edge, Poison Jab, then Headbutt, Knockoff, or a Cheeky Fling, maybe my favorite option on here in Taunt, which can really mess up some tanks that think they're going to sit in front of me or deal with Sock in a way other than the straightforward damage. So I am so ready to use Sock. What exactly can it do? I wonder, because the league has never drafted it, so we're finally excited to show the league what it's made of. Finally, we've got 40 points remaining from these transactions because we went down from 80 to 60 from the Mantine, so we've got Kangaskhan, something I really wanted last season in low tiers that didn't make it back to me. Base 90 speed and wish access are the main things I'm looking at, but don't sleep on its ability to sleep with early bird rest, or the scrappy normal moves to nail ghosts, and the coverage, wow. Fake Out, Sucker Punch, Body Slam for the main stab, Elemental Punches again. You can't switch on this and expect me not to have the coverage punch for it. Rock Slide, Earthquake, Low Kick or Drain Punch can be cheeky, Iron Tail, Crunch. I actually like Circle Throw a lot for phasing and consistent damage, especially if we can get those rocks up. Curse for setup, Aqua Tail, Wish of course, Toxic of course, Yawn which we saw week 2, that rest with one turn of sleep. The versatility of a normal type is amazing. And even if we're adding a little bit more of a fighting weakness by replacing Mantine's Resist with Kangaskhan's weakness, I'm still pretty comfortable with what we've been building around overall, and I think these 4 will be more effective than the 4 we had before. Of course, we're not the only one to have made transactions, as noted by one particular mod on the side of the Troopers. From top to bottom, they've got Raikou, Gengar, Emolga, a deep drop to Dragonite, Mesprit, Claydol, Celesteela, Tyranitar for the second time this season, Porygon 2, Dhelmise, and the Toxapex. Yeah, Chad dropped T-Tar after a Week 1 match for the Regieleki that had popped up, and the Troopers have snatched it up prior to Week 4. They traded out the Gigalith for T-Tar, but also the Lycanroc that abused the sand, and the Zapdos Galar that was hindered by the sand. Instead, Mesprit and Porygon 2, a hard pivot towards a Trick Room focus, or at least one that is ignoring the middle speed tiers. This team can still outspeed you. Raikou and Gengar are fast and at least decent Scarvers. Mesprit can Starve, Dragonite can D-Dance, Celesteela can Autotomize, but can also hard underspeed you and just put in HP and defense or attack investment. Dhelmise looks like the main abuser, but P2, Claydol, and Mesprit can set up Trick Room, and T-Tar is another strong abuser with Dhelmise. Finally, the defense. Headlined by Toxapex, supplemented by Celesteela, plus P2 now. It isn't pleasant to face or even prep for, and I can understand how they're 3-0, even if they haven't been facing the best or strongest opponents yet. We're no stranger to undefeated season ourselves, or a stranger to ending them, so let's get cracking. Emolga it's barely a real mon. I don't know if I can totally ignore it, or else my speed tiers will be punished. Maybe I have some electric attacks immune, and in response it's gonna, Volt Switch, T-Wave, Acrobatics? I really don't know what this thing does. It's barely on my radar. The same is pretty much true for Claydol, which I have become infamous for clowning on. It's got Rapid Spin and Teleport, maybe the ability to threaten a Toxic, Stealth Rock. That's about it. I would love the opportunity to set up on it, which I can do with, I believe, anything, but I have to be a little bit careful not to get clowned on myself. The interesting thing is that these two are my best opponents. My opponents' rather best removal options aside from the D-Knight. I don't think I can afford to bring either of these, nor anything but a sweeping D-Knight set, so this could be interesting. I probably need to respect everything else that can be brought, but I admit I'm not the most concerned about Mesprit. Having used it just last season, I can confirm that its move pool is wide enough to worry me about potential coverage, plus rocks, plus knockoff, plus U-turn, but I think the team matches up well against it. Most of the time my items haven't really mattered, especially in the first couple weeks, and I have a ton of super effective coverage, plus pivoting around it to probably trivialize it. I may be reaching on this a little bit considering it was brought against me earlier and I picked it not to, but T-Tar isn't exactly the greatest here either. I've only acquired better fighting coverage for it, and I think I've proven that my team stands up to Sandstorm incredibly well from the 2 previous times I've faced it. Maybe I'm wrong with these 2 though, as these are my opponent's 2 rock setters along with Claydol. Surely one of those 3 should come, right? But compared to the ones I'm worried about, we'll see. Similarly, I could be off base on this one, especially because my opponent has been favoring it immensely, and it's won at least one match this season on its own. But I actually think I have a real good matchup against Toxapex, to the point that it may just be a liability if it were to come. Of course I'm going to prep for it, pretty heavily in fact, as it's a mon that requires special attention to be able to break. But come on, if anyone's got the prep ready for it, surely it'd be me, right? We're going to see some interesting anti-Pex strats this week coming from the abundance of knockoff taunt and setup I have available to me, which I think should make Pex just not show up at all. Instead, I would propose the small Trick Room core of Porygon 2 and Dhelmise to come. Dhelmise's matchup is actually pretty great Kartana and Hydreigon aside, especially against my real slow mons that I can underspeed under Trick Room. Supplemented with that Trick Room or a bunch of speed investment, don't knock the ability to run a bunch of speed on something slow to outspeed the mid-tiers. Dhelmise could be looking to claim KOs when it comes in. Though, maybe I'm just remembering a great match in another league where Torn and Dhelmise traded KOs back and forth all game. Porygon 2 is the natural Trick Room setter, very bulky and slow pivot into Dhelmise with Teleport, though again I have a good amount of taunt and knockoff to help. Just a little bit of coverage, especially on the special side, can go a long way. Ice Beam, especially from it, looks disastrous alongside Toxic. The top 4 should definitely be coming. Raikou first, great speed for everything but Torn, which it still straight up beats 1v1, and the potential to go either AV with Scald, R-Sphere coverage, or maybe something like a Calm Mind setup. My electric matchup is usually great, but I also don't usually have to go against something with the coverage of Raikou, which is a little bit worrisome. Same goes for Gengar, whose drop in speed is negligible, but also don't need much more coverage than Ghost and D-Gleam, but still has Sludge Wave, Focus Blast, and Energy Ball. It's so fast it should easily be at least 2-KOing my whole team. I'm starting to think it was a mistake moving Gengar down a tier. But of course, the 2 mons I'm most afraid of losing to are Dragonite and Celesteela, the former probably more so. We've seen what can happen. My opponent leads D-Knight and D-Dances. That could be a game right there. My ice coverage isn't the absolute greatest. I also need to be sure I don't proc a weakness policy, while also being mindful of boots to keep multi-scale intact, plus a Lumberry to prevent status from wearing it down. So just a reminder that D-Knight can and will sweep you out of nowhere sometimes, even if you're prepared. Celesteela is something I have even fewer offensive answers to, and while D-Knight is scarier offensively, the versatility of Celesteela and the coverage it's liable to run absolutely does frighten me. Leech Seed Set, or Autotomize, or Meteor Beam. Each requires different counters which are relatively thin on my and frankly anyone else's team, so the pressure from the 2 fast mons plus the constant setup threat from these 2 are why they are my 4 scariest monsters to face. On my side though, it shouldn't be too surprising that Rabombi just cannot hack it. Yeah, I dropped Slurpuff for this because I thought I'd get more chance to actually find a use for it, but this one ain't it. Even as a fairy type for D-Knight, I didn't like risking the weakness proc, not to mention dual Wing Beat, which already looks like a good move on it, could just rip through me. Plus the inability to touch things like Celesteela, Toxapex without boosting, even T-Tar despite the super effective damage. Kangaskhan just won't cut it either. The versatility would be nice, but it isn't going to have both the bulk to tank hits it needs to, and the offensive power to take down the walls it would need to. Pex and Celesteela in particular stand out to me. I think even the time it would take to pass Wishes could be punished pretty effectively by my opponent. I actually quite like the matchup my other 9 mons have. It's a nice complement to the team overall and the matchup I think I have overall, which actually I believe this is a very good matchup for me, just from top to bottom. I am going to leave Bronzong again, mostly because it's again a passive answer to just about everything. It's a pretty decent Pex answer, but I don't like being burned by Scald. I don't even do half with my stab psychic moves anyways. Celesteela can sit on me forever too, neither are toxic. D-Knight doesn't care about it either, can set up, and if Gengar or Dhelmise finds a way in, that's just another problem. If those are several of my biggest concerns, I think we're going to have to pass on the bell. I do actually think Sawk had a pretty good matchup overall here, especially with things like Boot Sturdy to survive a Gengar hit, or Mold Breaker Ice Punch to break through multiscale, and potentially Oko Dragonite from full. Earthquake could 2-hit KO Pex, Close Combat could 2-hit KO Celesteela and Porygon 2, with an Oko on T-Tar, knockoff for Gengar or Dhelmise, but it wasn't quite enough for me to bring it in. This is more of a pressure piece similar to another mon I'm bringing, and ultimately my concern ended up being those faster mons like Raikou and Gengar that would either require a Scarf or something a little funkier from Sawk. But it's an encouraging sign to see a matchup like this. Finally, alongside Sawk, Swampert fought very hard for that last slot. Flip Turn is incredibly spammable, especially considering the resistance of Dhelmise and Toxapex are outsped with Toxapex getting hit by Stab EQ. I really like the idea of an Adamant Swampert, even with Stabs and Ice Punch, but decided I didn't really have enough offensive prowess to make up for what I was most afraid of, and a lot of grass coverage from the mons I already struggled a bit with. Energy Ball Gengar, Power Whip Dhelmise, and Giga Drain Celesteela were the main culprits for me there. Plus, with very little damage being done back to Celesteela, I wanted a few mons that could potentially apply a little bit more pressure. Once again, not an easy ride for all my top mons here, but I think Torn just had to come again. Relatively standard to start, speed for Raikou, lots of HP, taunt for Pex and Celesteela, with knockoffs being incredibly good in the matchup, plus a U-turn to potentially take advantage of some switches forced by that taunt, and Icy Wind to do consistently good damage to Dragonite and ideally slow it down enough that even my relatively fragile Steel type could tank a hit from extreme speed no matter how set up that thing gets. It could also make other things easier to revenge KO, and as mentioned, I love the knockoff into pretty much every single member. Pori2's Eviolite, Gengar's anything to take out most of its health too, Pex's Black Sludge, Celesteela's Recovery or Power Herb or Weakness Policy, D-Knight's boots or weakness policy, anything I can get rid of, will make my opponent's team about infinitely easier to deal with. So we'll see if we can spam that a little bit. I'll bring it back to the U-turn for a moment. I did really consider something like Heatwave here for Celesteela damage, who went with U-turn because I really want a strong pivot game this time around. We're going to keep that idea up with the first of my slow pivots, Arcanine. This good boy has been an offensive piece for us in his first 2 appearances, but now finally takes on a bulky role with lots of HP and speed for D-Knight, just in case we need to fire off that fat Toxic first. Toxic is amazing here to break down all of my opponent's bulky walls, especially P2 and D-Knight and T-Tar that can all threaten me without good coverage for them on this particular set, while Flare Blitz breaks down several other pieces surprisingly well, including the Dhelmise, Celesteela, Gengar, and Raikou. Where max HP with special investment to better tank those hits from those faster mons and trade back with them. Also because we do at least still have Intimidate for those physical mons, and at times it could be necessary to Intimidate cycle if needed against something like D-Dance D-Knight or Weakness Policy Celesteela. Morning Sun is kind of cute if I can sit in front of something and heal up, especially healing up the residual damage, although we do have to be a little bit wary of the Sandstorm reducing that. But my favorite move on the set is Teleport. You may notice I have 0 ways to hurt quite a few mons, and that does include the mons that I need to Toxic. All of those minus probably T-Tar and including Toxapex I'm comfortable with taking a hit against in order to teleport out. Let's say hypothetically I'm in against P2. I Toxic, P2 Trick Rooms. I can still get the slow pivot out thanks to Teleport no matter what there. Similarly, Pex. What's it going to do? Toxic, Scald. I feel prepared for Pex, but honestly I don't have anything this week that can switch into both of those. Arcanine can eat those and pivot out into one of the mons we're going to talk about in just a little bit. The slow pivot with all the bulk, plus the ability to still threaten Celesteela and the fastest mons on my opponent's team are why I really like Arcanine this week. We're going to keep the pivot train rolling. The last one is going to be the only debut this week, and that is Lantern with a relatively standard set. Volt Absorb is the choice for me to better wall Raikou. Water Absorb would be kind of cute for Pex, but it can still lay down a Toxic on me, so to better wall something I have very few other options for, it had to be Volt Absorb. Scald for burns and consistent damage. Volt Switch is another slow pivot highlight. Another Toxic user too as I threaten the Steel and Poison types with super effective damage. Standard stuff. The last slot is often dedicated to Heal Bell, which could be nice, but with Nidoqueen for T-Spikes and ideally a few Scald Burns, I don't think I need it necessarily. I considered Substitute as well with T-Bolt over Volt Switch to be able to sit in front of the Pex, but decided I wanted the pivot. That and Ice Beam is yet another really good, reliable, consistent way to hit the D-Knight. I really started to see D-Knight as the most important piece to avoid being swept by later on in team building, hence the desire to run Ice Beam and another interesting move or two that you'll see later on. 3 attacks on Lantern probably seems awkward with such a low stat, but with lefties and the typing that I do have, plus the utility of Scald Burns and Volt Switch pivoting out, I feel real good about the Anglerfish's debut, already doing something Mantine could not. But what, I hear you ask, am I prioritizing pivoting into? I'm glad you asked, dear viewer, who probably is not asking. We've got a couple of cute setup sets around this time, starting with one of the first sets I devised for the week, and it's going to be Hydreigon. Substitute up on something like a Gengar locked into Shadow Ball, a Raikou lacking R-Sphere, a Celesteela trying to Leech Seed, a Dhelmise fearing Dark Pulse, or maybe most importantly a Toxapex that can't even 2-hit KO my sub with just about anything, and go to town. Haze is something Pex could have, but it may only require a single Dark Pulse flinch for the plan to come together. Dark Pulse flinches, now what? Does Pex haze and go down to 2 more Dark Pulses anyways? Or does it recover and try to stall me out waiting for an inevitable second flinch or crit? The only Dark Resist in my opponent's team is T-Tar, which could definitely come as I look things a little bit more, so I really just need some chip on that. For the last move, I did heavily consider something like Earth Power, Flash Cannon as I brought in week 1, even Super Power to hit it from the physical side, but ultimately decided I'd just like to wait until Hydreigon can come in with T-Tar down and out. So I think that's probably good enough too, as long as we focus on chipping it down with everything else. And once it does go down, Hydreigon can come in and go to town. Instead, Draco Meteor can OHKO Dragonite at +2, even through multiscale, and that's a good enough calc for me to include it. It's a one-time nuke in case I don't want or need to set up, or finished after a nasty plot, or an emergency button against D-Knight, all the utility I want aside from dealing with T-Tar, so I think that's pretty nice. Glad I don't really need speed investment either. Only need enough for Mesprit and D-Knight again, who could both be packing super effective coverage pretty easily, which means lots of HP for sturdier subs plus lefties recovery. The other set I'm excited about, very similar, that I came up with only a couple hours before the match, is this Kartana set. Substitute a +2 boosting move and 2 coverage moves. Sounds very familiar, but with more of a little focus on offense rather than utility and bulk. We can run Adamant thanks to that low speed bar that we have to hurdle, and adding in the Salic Berry means we have the solution I'd been looking for. I was seriously going between Stalk, Swampert, and Kartana for the last slot, but decided on the Kartana at the end. Originally, I was going to run Adamant. I didn't think I could just pass that up, but I kept thinking about the matchup against Gengar and Raikou in the back of my mind. Salic Berry, however, is my solution. If I can finagle things such that I have a sub up and get the KO, Gengar or Raikou comes in to break the sub, maybe one for the other. If I just keep clicking sub, I'll get down to Salic range eventually, meaning I'll end the turn with a sub up and +1 speed. Click the move and I'm safe from there, barring a Scarf on the other one of them. 292 HP means that I'll activate the Salic Berry after 3 subs, all else being even. I don't want to go to 1 HP and give D-Knight the opportunity to revenge KO with extreme speed. Leaf Blade and Knockoff are the coverage moves. Knock and Sacred Sword are the only moves in my entire arsenal that can hit Celesteela neutrally, and Sacred Sword would mean that D-Knight gets away scot-free, so Knockoff is definitely necessary, with Leaf Blade destroying the Dark Resist of T-Tar along with the other mons like the Toxapex, another prime candidate to set up on thanks to our Scald Resist. Those are the setup threats. The last one to talk about is going to be the Breaker. After watching what Nidoking did last week, Nidoqueen is in this time, rocking Bolt Beam and Earth Power, which should cover everything I'm worried about. Stealth Rock is a necessary addition, I think. I don't see much in the way of removal or rock resist, so that'll necessitate that as the final move. Plus Special Attack Nature and the Life Orb, finally, are the main appeals of this set, though, as we've got the opportunity to rip apart everything. In particular, T-Tar, Celesteela, and D-Knight are the biggest threats that I want Nidoqueen to hit, hence the coverage. I'll trade Nidoqueen to get up rocks and chunk 1 or 2 of those 3 every time, and I'll most definitely throw in the speedy threats I mentioned earlier of Gengar and Raikou. P2 is the only thing I don't hit too hard, so I'll have to be a little bit careful with that, but here's another mon taking advantage of Pex. I Earth Power, swap into Celesteela or D-Knight. Okay, I'll trade with that easy, so long as I don't proc a weakness policy, which I can scout for, but with Stealth Rock, we'll be in business. A little bit of speed too, in case Mesprit or D-Knight don't invest in speed. I suspect I'll be leading this for rocks, but if Mesprit or Claydol come for my opponent, I'll lead Torn and either knock straight away or taunt to stop rocks in the first place. That's what we're rolling with. I feel good about the matchup, despite the Troopers being undefeated. Let's test things out in the match. No Raikou is a relief, and no Delmise is probably pretty fair. Toxapex did come, strangely I'm happy about that, and T-Tar is here for the 2nd time this season, the 3rd time we face off against Sand. As stated, I'll lead Nidoqueen for rocks and to threaten the T-Tar good luck have fun to the Troopers. And sure enough, T-Tar lead against Nidoqueen. Let's see what Sand does this time. Remember that last week against Steve we didn't have rocks and we clicked Earth Power right away. This time we have the rocks. There's got to be at least a little concern for something like weakness policy. Getting up the rocks turn 1 is just a pretty easy play, even with the potential concern for Earthquake. And we were just going to exchange rocks. That makes a whole lot of sense for turn 1. That's good by me. I got to prioritize breaking multi-scale if D-Knight has no boots. And again, I've got boots in my 2 weaknesses, so no worries over here. Now what? I need damage on this before I can even think about going to Hydreigon. Earth Power may have been real nice that first turn just for that, but that's fine. I'm cool with just clicking the Earth Power button this time. Go into Celesteela, take the rocks damage, dodge the Earth Power. While it seems not so great, those Stealth Rocks did help me learn something, which is, of course, that Leftovers recovery. No weakness policy, no power or Meteor Beam. That's an excellent sign that we know what the set is, so good, in fact, that I don't mind just clicking T-Bolt. As expected, though, we're not going to get that first turn, just to protect to get it back up healthy, but that's fine. Again, though, I got up the rocks, and now we're just trying to have Nidoqueen get damage on a couple team members, Celesteela included. We are, in fact, just going to click it again just for that 50% damage from the T-Bolt. Excellent, and only an Air Slash in return, not doing much. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Air Slash would be great neutral coverage for my team, aside from Lantern. Not sure what the plan is there. Of course, we're going to have one more Protect, and then I could see a switch potentially coming, but I don't mind. I'm just here to make sure that Celesteela isn't potentially healthy, among other things. That is all. And even after the switch into P2, which is finally the mon that walls Nidoqueen, takes about 25% from the T-Bolt in addition to the rocks, so that's pretty good. That is not a Spit FP2. That's actually more than I thought I'd end up doing. Still, very little damage to it overall. It's time for me to switch out. I don't have great answers, but Arcanine and Lantern are the best I've got and the most expendable. Plus, as my pivots, they'll do nicely to get me into my bigger and better threats. And finally, I'm actually a little bit scared of Ice Beam coming from a sheer force boost that P2 just copied. I'm going to go into Arcanine, maybe a little more free with my boots, as the Trick Room is going to come off. That's just not a surprise at all. No Delmise to abuse it, though, so I'm much less scared. I'm going to fire off the Toxic in case P2 wants to recover, or if it tries to go out into T-Tar straight away, or if it's trying to teleport. But it's just a good smart switch into Pex to nullify that. That is totally fine. Really don't mind. We're in a situation I detailed in the team builder. Nothing on my team can take both a Scald and a Toxic, so I need to be comfortable with letting Arcanine take it as I get the slow teleport out. First, Knockoff is going to go in, do a decent bit, takes care of my boots. It's a little bit weird, but according to my calcs, actually, we do see that Bold Pex cannot do as much as that did. That means it's either relaxed with both Knockoff and Scald, or it's impish and it doesn't have Scald. Heck, I mean, just not having a minus attack nature is enough to make me think Scald is less likely, so we're going to remember that, for sure. For now, it's back to Nidoqueen. I doubt my opponent will let this go down to an Earth Power 2, so we're going to keep up the pressure. Earth Power away, and even though I am slower, they're just going to pivot out, get the Regenerator health, and go out into P2 again, who takes more rocks. Obviously, this is the best wall to Nidoqueen, but after 2 rounds of rocks, that's not looking very healthy, and it's starting to look a little beat up. With Trick Room expiring next turn, I am just staying in for another one as my opponent recovers up. That may just be a mistake. We see Trick Room go down. I got the slow Earth Power, and that's going to bring P2 back low to potentially within range of another one. And with Trick Room expired, I now outspeed again. That's what happens when you bring the Trick Room to the Trick House. And now what? Well, it just makes a little bit of sense that Celesteela is going to come back out. We already went through this. I'm more than satisfied with trading with Celesteela after a little bit more protecting and such. T-Bolt is going to do just a ton of damage and get a better roll this time as well. It's going to bring it down to just 4% before Leech Seed comes out to sap some health. That's a pretty easy protect to read, and considering that we haven't seen Earthquake yet, I'm actually going to swap out now. Nidoqueen will be a little bit below half when it comes out again, but that's fine. I just need to, I got the damage off that I wanted on this. I don't want it to heal up even more from Leech Seed. So I'm actually going to go out into another friend here in Lantern. Easy switch, heal a little bit with lefties after that. And now, actually, do we Volt Switch? That seems pretty easy to read, and I have a bad feeling that I could have a lot of progress undone if Porygon 2 were to be the one that switches in, copies Volt Absorb, and heals up from that. I'm actually going to click Scald this time, and I may just be able to KO this anyways, depending on investment and such. Even better, the one to come out is going to be the T-Tar. Can we snag a burn? Do rocks damage, do Scald damage? No burn, but the rocks and Scald Chip will bring it down to about 61%. That's what we'd love to see. That may just be within range of a +2 Draco now too, actually. We're softening up everything now aside from the D-Knight, so we're going to start looking at that pretty soon. We're going to Scald again, of course, looking for the burn. No fear. This time, though, it's going to be the swap into Pex, and though we don't do much damage to it, this time we are actually going to get the burn. That's pretty sweet. Look at all this end of turn crap. Sandstorm, Lefties, Black Sludge, burn. Man, oh man, that's so much. Well, Volt Switch is a pretty hard telegraph play again, and it's making me wish I was a little bit better prepared for Porygon 2. That and a Baneful Bunker could be coming, meaning a Volt Switch may just be doing nothing. Well, if that's the case, what am I expecting to come out? My money is on Baneful Bunker, though Toxic could be a cute option from it. Scald isn't happening. Knockoff could happen again too. If Baneful and Toxic are the best possibilities, why don't I swap out? You know, I think even better, maybe it's about time we execute one of our biggest strats for the match. We're going to actually hard switch out into Kartana on the Baneful Bunker. Got him. Next up, you can't break my sub, so we're going to just sub up. Knockoff doesn't break. That's step 2. And now for step 3. On this next turn, ooh, Baneful Bunker was not the correct move. Sword Stance, that's the final step. So that looked real easy, but I would like to take a moment to think about that real quick, actually. I went through the idea of the switch, and we looked at the calcs to see that Knockoff should be doing around 16 to 18% on cart. That means a second would break the sub, but then what? I'm just going to sub again, and even if I get hazed, you got to figure out what to do between the sub being up and Sword Stancing up. Plus, at this point, Pex is within range of a +2 Leaf Blade. Finally, this was all brought to you by research. It's times like this I'm grateful to be able to do the power rankings each week, as they give me an opportunity to look at everyone's matches and their tendencies. Yes, the Troopers were undefeated last season, and yes, they're undefeated this season, but there are a few tendencies you can pick up on. Leech Seed protects Celesteela, and Baneful Bunker Toxapex, for example, featured prominently a few times already just this season. We can take advantage of that, and this Kartana set is a culmination of that. This is a fancy way to say that the game may well be over right here and now. We're going to just click Leaf Blade. There's no reason to be greedy and risk a haze. And as you already know, Pex down, +3. It does mean Hydreigon can't really set up the same way anymore, but that'll do. Dragonite's the Revenge Answer, a fair idea considering the multi-scale that we see from Boots. How will the sub be broken? We're going to find out. Knockoff in, we already know that it is Boots. 62% through the multi-scale, holy. And it's going to be dual Wing Beat in return. That breaks the sub and does 20% with the second hit. Now we have the decision to make that could be game winning. We're now sitting at just under half, and Dragonite is poised to take another 40% afterwards. Knockoff is pretty obvious, right? Well, with our sub down, we know the Gengar is ready to get the revenge KO. But maybe if we safely sub one more time, Dual Wing Beat requires both hits to break the sub, and then we aren't in range of an E-Speed. More importantly, that would bring us to 24%, proc the Salic Berry, and then we outspeed Gengar. Well, if it's Scarfed, it's Scarfed, and it'll result in the same outcome either way, so I say we try it. I'm going to sub and just go for it. We get the best case scenario, which actually makes a little bit of sense here, as D-Knight switches out into T-Tar. This was an attempt to sack the T-Tar and let the D-Knight potentially set up later, as the Troopers probably correctly identified that as the only real remaining win con for their team. Instead, I take advantage of it, and with the +1 speed, should wrap this up. We're, of course, just going to Leaf Blade the T-Tar, get up to +4 attack. That's kind of insane. Gengar is going to be up next. Does it outspeed? No, it does not. We're going to knock off the Scarf. Yeah, this Gengar was not meant to outspeed +1 Scarf or anything, just the Rabambi. That means it was heavily HP invested. Knock off KOs, though, +5 attack, though I am now a little bit limited in having to click Leaf Blade against 4 times resists. Well, in case you're wondering, though, my attack stat is somewhere around 2,500, so I don't think we've got any issues here at Leaf Blade. A couple of 4 times resists. Now we're +6, followed by the P2 after that. That's going to be a very clean, very simple, very easy 6-0 victory over the Troopers. GG to my opponent, but Cortana, it was simply too much. I think I did a decent job explaining throughout the match why the Cortana worked as it did, so I don't think we need to go in depth here at the end. Suffice to say, this was a perfect weird matchup call that worked to perfection. Nabbing Cortana all 6 KOs, the league leader now at 8 overall, and my MVP of the match. Though big shout out to Nidoqueen for sitting in front of everything early game and chipping away. By dropping an undefeated team, and the only other one dropping as well, we are now atop a 6-way tie for first place. Yep, 6 teams at 3-1. But after the 6-0, we have the best differential among all of them. It does feel good to be back on top, and until playoffs are clinched, we cannot rest. The Raw and Burbs are next, and even if they're at 2-2, they've won each of their last 2 matches. We know they're hungry to get back in it, so next we'll see if they can manage. See ya.